lights burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Painted faces, masks of stone. A hollow laugh that chills the cruel machine. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Or just believe it? Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. A stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row.
Hello and welcome back. Our topic today is Monsanto versus Durnell. So in a Missouri courtroom, a man tells a jury about chemotherapy, about the weight loss, about the pain, about the day he was told the cancer had a name. And across from him sits a company worth tens of billions of dollars, a company that didn't invent the product he used, but bought it, defended it, and now fights to protect it. And so this is not just a lawsuit. This is a story about chemicals, corporations, and, of course, accountability. About how risk is defined and who gets to define it. Welcome to Breaking the System, Monsanto versus Durnell. So where does the story really begin? Well, to understand Monsanto, you have to understand the company called Bayer. Bayer was founded in 1863 in Germany, and not as an agricultural company, but as a chemical dye manufacturer. And of course, over time, Bayer became one of the most powerful chemical and pharmaceutical corporations in the world. Okay. Well, how is that? What did they create? What did they do? They created aspirin. They created heroin, which was originally marketed as a cough suppressant during the 1890s. They also created certain synthetic dyes, industrial chemicals, certain pharmaceuticals, and of course they created crop protection products. So Bayer's history is inseparable from the rise of industrial chemistry. But it also includes one of the darkest chapters in corporate history. During World War II, Bayer was part of the IG Farben, a massive German chemical conglomerate that produced Zyklon B, the gas used in Nazi extermination camps. And after the war, Farben was dismantled, but Bayer survived. Okay? Now you got to be asking yourself, why does this matter? Well, that matters not because Bayer today is in Nazi Germany, but because it shows a long corporate culture built around what we call chemicals first and consequences later, right? And by the 21st century, Bayer was looking to expand aggressively into the agricultural market, and that's where Monsanto enters this story. So Monsanto began in 1901 in St. Louis, Missouri. Really nice little town, right? Wasn't originally an agricultural company either. So Monsanto made saccharin, industrial chemicals, PCBs, and Agent Orange, which was used during the Vietnam War. Horrible, horrible stuff. And by the late 20th century, Monsanto reinvented itself as a biotech and agricultural giant, focusing on things like genetically modified seeds and chemical herbicides. But what was its most profitable product? And I guarantee you, I bet most of you have either heard of this, have used it, or have it in your garage or in your barn or somewhere on your property. And that product would be Roundup. Okay. Why is Roundup so important? Well, we have to start looking at the active ingredient that is used in Roundup, and that is called glyphosate. Well, what is glyphosate? Glyphosate is a broad-spectrum systemic herbicide, and in simple terms, it kills plants by disrupting a biochemical pathway essential for growth, the shikimate pathway, which plants use to produce key amino acids. And so in humans, we don't have that pathway. And that's why glyphosate was marketed as safe. Okay? And we're going to get into this, but I want to stop real quick. Why do we as humans think that we can spray chemicals on plants or things that we're potentially going to eat to where it stops some kind of growth naturally, right? Whether if it's the plants or it stops like insects from eating the plants, right? If it's harmful for those things, how is it not harmful for us? And even for small amounts in the long term of things, and we're talking, day after day, month after month, year after year, exposure after exposure, how is that not bad for us? And even if it is within the safe limits, right? Because that's what a lot of these companies like to do, and what the government likes to do is they want to put a safe limit on everything. And how is this safe for any kind of consumption or any kind of exposure? Okay? So that's how glyphosate was marketed as safe. But the critical detail is Roundup is not just glyphosate. There's more to this formulation. Okay? So glyphosate plus surfactants and other chemicals that help in that help it penetrate the plant cells. And some scientists are now arguing that these added ingredients may increase toxicity, right? Because one ingredient by itself might not be harmful to humans, or might not be harmful to plants, or might not be harmful to animals or whatnot, right? But once we start adding other additives, other chemicals to the mixture, how is that changing? Okay? And we really have to start thinking about this stuff. Okay? So others say that glyphosate alone is harmless. And this disagreement sits at the heart of this litigation. And in 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as, quote unquote, and this is their quotes, problematic or probably carcinogenic to humans. And I love the terminology that a lot of these places use, that it's probably carcinogenic. Yeah, you know one way or another what this stuff does, right? You're just not going to tell us, okay? Or tell us in terms to where the majority of society is going to understand these things, right? Other regulators, including the U.S. EPA, well, they disagree. So now we've got two conclusions based off the same data that could have massive consequences, right? And so now we enter the acquisition where Bayer is going to buy Monsanto. And that comes in 2018, and Bayer acquired or bought Monsanto for $63 billion. And at the time, this was one of the largest corporate acquisitions in history. So Bayer, being the parent company now, and buying this other company out, they inherited Monsanto's products, their patents, their profits, and critically, all of Monsanto's legal liabilities. And at the time, thousands of lawsuits were already forming from this product. And so the company Bayer, they bet on the idea that regulators within the system, right, the one that we're trying to break down and destroy, that these regulators would protect them, okay? And hopefully, and as of right now, they're wrong, which is great. So we enter the courtroom. And so John Durnell used Roundup for years. And he believed, or he developed, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And his lawsuit didn't claim that Monsanto intended to harm him. It claimed that Monsanto failed to warn him. And that distinction really matters. Okay? It really does. And so the latest jury found that, well, they found two things. One is that Monsanto did not adequately warn users of the cancerous risks. And the other is that the failure to warn was a substantial factor in Darnell's injuries. And so they awarded him $1.25 million in compensated damages. No punitive damages, no emotional theatrics or damages, just on the idea of accountability. Okay? And that's important because companies have to be held accountable for their actions, right? Because at the end of the day, that is part of the job for our government, is to make sure, in the form of regulations and regulators, that companies are doing things safe for us, for humans, for the planet, right? And that's extremely important, because if the government's not doing its job, then why the hell do we have the government, right? Why do we have these regulators? Why do we have these certain systems put into play if they're not going to do their job and protect us, right? So that's the overall idea, okay? So Bayer's defense rests on one word, and that word would be preemption. So they argue federal regulators approved Roundup's label, so states shouldn't be allowed to impose different requirements. And so they've took this back to court, and if Bayer wins, it could shield corporations from state-level accountability, even when juries find that harm does exist or has existed. Okay, that's very problematic. what's great is if Bayer ends up losing all of these appeals, right, which they will appeal, because corporations are great at this. You also have to keep this in mind too, is that who has more money? You as an individual consumer, or these giant conglomerate corporations with billions of dollars who have some of the greatest lawyers, right, which they pay year after year, time after time. Who has more resources? Who's going to win at the end? And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the corporation, because they're going to put you in litigation after litigation, appeal after appeal, until you, the individual consumer, doesn't have any more money to fight. And that's a reality for a lot of people, okay? But if Bayer loses, it opens the door to thousands and thousands more cases. And this is why this case matters way beyond what's happening in Missouri, even way beyond what's happening with Bayer and Monsanto and with Mr. Durnell, because this could have ramifications for other companies. And whether if Bayer is really to blame or not, right, at the end of the day, and even at the beginning of the day, we should be able to pick up a product and to use it within the warning labels that's set on there, within the parameters, and be safe. And if we're using things like Roundup, and just from general exposure it's causing cancer to us or our animals, our pets, somebody should be liable. Somebody needs to fix this, okay? So the legal arguments are clean, which cancer is not, which is what Mr. Durnell has. So Durnell has went through chemotherapy. He has lost many things, including weight and strength and years of his life fighting against this corporation, this company. Across the country, plaintiffs tell similar stories, right? And so we put on our thinking caps. We're doing critical thinking here. If this is affecting more than just one person, then I would say it's an open and closed case, right? It's not just one person that this is affecting, right? So some juries believed them and some didn't. But the damage to bodies, to families, and to trust, right? That's already done and over with. And there's many, many questions that should be asked here. Like, so is there a safer alternative? Is there a way that I can do the things that Roundup does, right, without all of the chemical byproducts that cause cancer? And there are more safe alternatives, or safer alternatives to, like, killing grass, or making sure that your garden doesn't have weeds, or whatever it is that you're using Roundup for, right? There's many, many more safe alternatives. The problem is that it's just like with the pharmaceutical industry. We as humans, especially as Americans, we want the cheapest, fastest, easiest, most effective method to do anything, right? And that makes us complacent. It makes us lazy, and in the end, we as consumers, we pay the price for this stuff, right? Just like popping a pill. The better alternative would be, like, maybe watch your diet, maybe exercise, right? Same thing here. Instead of spraying Roundup all over your yard, maybe invest in a weed trimmer. Maybe go out and pull the weeds by hand. Maybe come up with some kind of real safe salt solution that kills them without the glyphosates, right? And so we go back to our case. Our conclusion here is that this case isn't about whether chemicals are evil or whether corporations are evil. It's about the overall system, right? Which every episode that we talk about, it's about the system. A system where safety is debated after the harm has already occurred, where profit comes before precaution, and where accountability depends on who has the resources and who doesn't to fight back. And so, like we said, Bayer didn't invent glyphosate, but Bayer chose to defend it, and it chose to defend it at all costs. And so John Durnell didn't set out to challenge a global corporation. In the beginning and in the end, he just wanted to know why he was sick, and possibly to make sure that others didn't get sick, right? If you have a chance to not only save yourself, but to save family members, your neighbors, your pets, your best friends, right? Would you not want to do that? Would you not want to make the world a little bit safer by getting rid of some of these chemicals that harm, that do more harm than they do good? Like we put out on our critical thinking caps, like, is there even a reason to have Roundup other than just it's a real cheap, effective method for doing what it does, right? So in breaking the system, we ask one question over and over. Who pays the price when this system fails? And this system that is put in place to protect us, to guide us, to be there for it when we need it, who pays the price? Well, we do. You and I do, the consumers, right? And so sometimes the answer comes from a courtroom, and sometimes the answer comes from a hospital room, and that's bad. And sometimes it comes from both, right? Sometimes it really does. So I thank you for joining us on this episode today. This is Breaking the System. You guys have a good day. We'll see you next time.